Hey guys, Argent here. So I've gotten some requests to do more videos on monarchy. I've been intending to do them, but as you can see, I produce a lot of content on a lot of different topics. I like to think that's what makes my channel interesting compared to some of the other people who are a bit more narrow. I'm not insulting them, I'm just saying if you want like my views on different stuff, you can come here for it. So there's that, and I also had a bit of a discussion in the comments of a previous video where I did a response to Millennial Woes talking about truth and the ruling class and the people. And his view was that only the ruling class could really understand truth and moral ambiguities, and that the vast mass of humanity can only understand truth on a one-dimensional level. That's not to say you don't lie to them. It's just that they need to be shielded from moral ambiguity and from the actual truth of things, not because it's to delude them, but just because they can't physically process it. They can't handle it. And this combined with some other things, I was having a discussion with Tsar and Iberian as to what to do with the refugee crisis in the Mediterranean, and the issue of whether to not or not to sink the boats came up, and that kind of evolved into a discussion about religion and morality, or religion and governance. Because I do believe that governments should, generally speaking, try to act in a utilitarian fashion for the benefit of their people, within reason, of course. And religion certainly has a mitigating role. But I freely acknowledge that there is a tension there, and that's a tension that's been around since the beginning. Since God ordered the Israelites to slaughter his enemies. And I defend God in that because most of his enemies were degenerates who sacrificed children to deities and did other horrific things. But my point is, and I'll read a passage in a minute from a book I've written, and it's a fantasy book, and part of it is where they're discussing monarchy and the right of a king. But there's always been that tension. Even God faces that tension between doing the right thing and doing what's necessary to fulfill a greater good. And people can say, well, God doesn't ever make those decisions, but he clearly does. He destroyed the world in the Bible to cleanse it of sin and to have a new start for humanity. He killed millions of people. And I support him in that decision. I'll defend it. I'm just saying, even he has to make these compromises at some point in time. Because that's just the nature of the world. And that's a constant theme throughout history, in particular in Christian history, because Christianity does posit a universal morality. But at the same time, it doesn't posit a specific way for how society is supposed to run. Um, it doesn't say you shall have one world government. If anything, it says there shouldn't be a one world government. It doesn't say you need to have a multi-culti grand dildo society. It doesn't say nations can't have borders. It doesn't say much about government aside from some general principles. And God himself in human form even alludes to this when he says, render unto Caesar what belongs to Caesar and render unto God what belongs to God. And there's always a tension there because we do have Caesars and we do have God. And God comes first, but at the same time, even if God does come first, we have to live in Caesar's world and we have to live under Caesar's rule. And you see this frequently throughout the Old Testament, where God will raise up Caesars, and I'm just using the term Caesar here to mean any kind of secular ruler, um, to make hard decisions. And I think that's ultimately why we had kings and what the duty of the ruling class is. The ruling class, to an extent, in a functioning society, should be the sacrifice of the society. They are the great people who are chosen for their greatness to bear the greatest burdens. They have to make the decisions that normal people can't and shouldn't make. They get their hands dirty so the rest of us can live safe. Um, because there are decisions in life, like maybe in the end we won't be able to turn all the refugees around, and maybe they'll have to start sinking the boats, for instance. And that is a decision that most people can't handle making. And or as for any number of these things, be it mass immigration, be it feminism, be it any aspect of liberalism, these things do immense damage to society. And we have leaders who make their decisions based on feelings, and we have a leadership that's not capable of dealing with moral ambiguity or moral responsibility. Sorry, that's a bunch of stuff I just spat out there. So just go back and take this apart a bit. So my point is, the idea of a ruling class is they are people who can fully look at the world, who can accept moral ambiguity, who can study history and can study moral philosophy, etc., and can look at all of this and then come to decisions. Decisions that are often utterly despicable or horrible to the average person. Like, for instance, an example of this, and these are decisions in pursuit of a greater good. Like during the Middle Ages, the general rule on sieges was if you surrendered before a siege, the troops would be paroled and they'd be allowed to leave. If you made them go through a siege and the besieging army took the castle by storm, they would slaughter everybody. Now, this is brutal, and this is the kind of decision an average person would shy away from. But if they didn't do that, then there would be no reason to give up before a siege. There would be no reason to surrender, and besieging armies would lose far more people through disease and starvation, etc. So that's the kind of decision you have to make. Pinochet had to, and Franco had to make the decision to kill thousands of people to prevent civil war, to cleanse their country of subversive influences. And by Franco conducting his purges, he ensured that the Spanish Civil War wouldn't happen. So he had to kill like 10,000 people to save hundreds of thousands or millions in a second civil war. And that is the kind of decision the average person can't and shouldn't be making. And that's why we had an aristocracy. That's why we had a monarch. That's why we had a ruling class. That's why we gave them power and prestige and position, because they were people who could do what we could not. They could handle these ambiguities. They could offer up their personal decency and their moral compass, and they could offer that up for the good of their society. And what we have today with democracy is we have a ruling class who can't think in moral ambiguities. They are not aristocrats. They are not monarchs. They aren't even the smartest lay people. They aren't even people like me, and I'm nothing special, but I can understand moral ambiguities and I can understand the concept of a greater good. They aren't even like that. They are literally the people who are least capable of understanding moral ambiguities, the people least capable of thinking in terms of a greater good, of thinking utilitarian, and thinking what's best for society. They are people motivated solely by petty emotion, by just what feels good at the moment. They just have a very, oh, this feels good, oh, I have to help these people, etc. Society be damned. The ultimate good of my people be damned. I don't care about them. Um, like, I think a good example of this is my buddy Constantine here, um, who had to kill a lot of people because he reunified the Roman Empire. He had to go to war constantly, and that was a tension with his faith. And in the end, he was baptized a couple days before he died. And that I think really shows off the tension between heaven and earth of doing God's will and doing God's morality, while at the same time having to rule your kingdom and the tension there. So the problem with our ruling class is, like Millennial Woe said, I think this is a perfect description of them, is they're bland and ballless. They're men with no imagination, no talent for moral complexity, no conception of the greater good. They're just simple one track mind, something Tom Sowell would call stage one thinkers, and that's because they're elected by stage one thinkers. They're elected by the masses. They're elected by people who, rightfully so, didn't don't think in these terms. They don't think about what's good for society. They think what's good for them and maybe their family and maybe their community. And that's what they should be thinking of. That's why we had an aristocracy. That's why we had a division of labor in society. And democracy breaks that down. It breaks down that concept of responsibility, etc. So I just like to read a passage on this from a book I've written. So that should only be 5 minutes or so. So This is just the son, the adopted son of an emperor who's unifying a kingdom and is making very brutal decisions in unifying the kingdom. And the emperor is devoutly religious to my in-universe form of Christianity. And this is a discussion about rulership. How do you reconcile all of it, Father? All the people you have killed, the lies you have told, the betrayals? How do you reconcile that with your religiosity, with the new world you are building? Father smiles at me sadly. I will answer your question with a question. The scriptures tell of how God destroyed the world of his first creation, killed all but half a dozen of his children, how he slaughtered the firstborn sons of his enemies, ch- men and children alike, how he bid his people to show no mercy to them. How do you think he reconciles this? I blink at him. But you're not God, I say in surprise. Father sighs. No, I am not. But I do have to face the same decisions. I am a monarch, an emperor. I have been granted the power of life and death. My word is law and my command is obeyed. I am emperor by the grace of God. Do you know what that means, my son? I nod. It means you claim that power has been invested in you by God himself to rule on his behalf on earth in secular matters. Father continues. I am his vice regent, and as such I wield his authority. And so while yes, I am not God, I share in his burdens. Father gestures to a pile of papers on his desk. Every one of these is a decision, my son. Sometimes there are easy ones with a good and bad decision choice to be made, but more often you have to make hard choices. Choices where you often get to pick who lives and who dies. Take this one, for instance. He points to a document. This is authorizing an assault on one of the tribal villages. The expected casualties are a couple dozen. If I sign this, they and the people they will kill will die by a stroke of my pen. So tell me, son, what should I do? I sit there a moment. I don't know, Father. It's too hard. We need unity, but to make such a decision. He smiles at me and leans over to squeeze my hand. There, my son, you have your answer. To be a monarch is to make such decisions. Even God himself cannot solve the problems of the world without fire and blood. How can we do better than him? That is the price of greatness, my son. That is why men like you and I are born with abilities greater than those of others. Why I was able to forge a kingdom with my will. Um, how another general who is much softer was how it was able to win against stronger opponents with a much smaller force, and how you are stronger than men greater than you. We are born to serve, born to bear the burdens of a world that would crush lesser men. The price of greatness, my son, is your personal decency. The price is a clean conscience, a peaceful mind, the luxury of never compromising, of following your heart and choosing the path of least resistance. I do what I do and I make the decisions I do for the same reason God does, because they are what is necessary and because no one else can or will make them. That is why the people give me power, Theo. That's why they accept my rule. They don't want the responsibility. They can't do what I do, and so they accept me. But, Father, how do you know it's necessary? How do you know what you're doing is right? You don't have God's ability to see all things. My father looks at me sadly. What else can I do? He shrugs, and there's a moment of vulnerability that shocks me. I don't know, Father. He smiles. An honest answer. I appreciate it. He gets up from the desk and goes to look out the window. It is evening, but you can still clearly make out the city over the setting sun. What do you see out there, my son? Look at it through the eyes of a monarch. I consider a moment. My quick mind processes everything he has said, and I respond. I remember, Father, you told me once that the moment you started on this path was when you thought about all the people out there, with their desires and dreams and how they struggle for them, no matter how hard life is. They continue to fight and push forward. How even when the individual falls, civilization and the nation remain. That is what I see, Father. People. Our people. Your people. People who you have responsibility for. You have taken all their might and all their dreams into yourself. They have given their trust and surrendered themselves to you in the belief that you can fulfill their dreams and make a better world for them. But, Father, while it is indeed noble to sacrifice for a nation, the nation that cannot protect or care for its people is a nation not worth sacrificing for. You are spending yourself up, Father. You are burning too brightly, and you will eventually implode. I have seen how this troubles you. You can't forgive yourself, and more than that, You don't believe you will be around long enough for it to matter. Yeah, so um, basically, the Emperor in this is just saying that he's a human sacrifice. He will sacrifice himself, his personal decency, his moral compass for the good of the nation, for the good of the people. Um, he expects the guilt he feels and the inherent conflict between his religiosity and the way he rules the nation to eat away at him until there's nothing left but a shell of a man, and he kind of hopes to die before that. That is the kind of sacrifice that used to be demanded of individuals. We don't ask our leaders to make that sacrifice today. We ask them to always choose the path of least resistance, to never think in the best interest of the nation, and to never choose the hard decision. And that is, I think, the best defense of monarchy. Um, that it's really the only way to deal with the inherent contradictions of heaven and earth. This is Argent Templar signing out.